by the pound sign.
After the tone, please state your name.
Welcome to today's webinar, How to Market Your CTE STEM Program, Tell Your Story to the Right People, the Right Way, and Get the Right Results, presented by Jill Chan. My name is Greg Nagy, and I am the Virtual Learning Community Manager from The Ohio State University, who provides technical support for the STEM Equity Pipeline project. Before we start the presentation, I would like to go over some housekeeping items for this webinar. This webinar is scheduled to last roughly 1 hour and is being recorded in order to view this presentation in its entirety later. The recorded webinar will be available in the next few days on the www.stemequitypipeline.org website. As you've already found out, you will be watching the presenter present slides through the live meeting interface while listening to them talk over your phone. If you cannot get the live meeting software to work today, you can download today's slides from the homepage of the stemequitypipeline.org website and follow along using your phone. All the attendees' phones have been automatically muted. The presenter will answer questions after the presentation. However, we can take questions at any time. This is how we take questions. At any time during the presentation and during the Q&A, you may submit a question by clicking on the button labeled Q&A at the top left of your live meeting window, type in your question, and then click the Ask button. The presenter or I will read and respond to these questions at the end of the presentation. You can download today's slides from the handout icon at the top right of your live meeting window. I would like to start the webinar by introducing Mimi Lupkin, CEO, National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity and STEM Equity Pipeline Project Director. Mimi?
Thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. We have, I think, a great webinar planned for you, and so let's get right to it. I'm going to do just a very brief overview of the project, which we always do at the beginning of each of our webinars, but would encourage you, if you are new to the STEM Equity Pipeline work, to go to the website to check out the resources that we have available to you there. But let's first of all find out how you heard about this webinar. I'm going to put a poll up here in just a second for you to respond to. These are the answers to the poll. But what I'd like to ask you to do is if you, here we go, if you respond to the email from a listserv or a presentation at a conference or announcement in another newsletter, if you wouldn't mind, in the Q&A section, you can submit the specific information about where you heard about the webinar. For example, if you got an email from another listserv and you happen to be on a state-level listserv, you could tell us what listserv that was. If you received it from another newsletter, if you'd let us know the name of the newsletter, that would be very helpful too. It gives us a sense of the breadth of our ability to reach out across the country and how we can best market our own activities. All right, I'm going to give you just another second or two to respond, and I'm going to go ahead and close the polls. Everyone, all you have to do is just click on the radio button on the left next to the caller. All right, I'm going to close the polls and go ahead and show the results. This is a little different than usual for us. Actually, this is interesting because it looks like 58% of you got this information directly from us via our listserv, and about 35% from a colleague. A couple of you got from other places, but it looks like maybe our listserv communications are doing a good job of reaching out to everyone. So that's good news from our perspective. All right, we'll go back to the PowerPoint now. And as far as the STEM Equity Pipeline is concerned, let me just give you a little brief background. This is a project of the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity Education Foundation. It's funded by the National Science Foundation, part of their Gender and Science and Engineering program. And the project has three big goals. The first one is, of course, to build the capacity of the formal education community to integrate gender equity into STEM professional development in the states in which we work, and also to try to increase the availability of gender equity in STEM professional development nationally, such as through these webinars that we conduct. We also can connect the work that we're doing in the states very closely with accountability systems. We use a program improvement model that includes the data-driven decision-making process. And lastly, we do a lot of outreach activities around the country and at national meetings to try to broaden the commitment to gender equity and STEM education. The methods in which we attempt to do this is through professional development activities, teacher training, consulting and technical assistance with the states that we're working in. Our website, what we call the virtual learning community, contains lots of really good resource materials. And we are going to be creating a best practices virtual handbook. It'll be an online piece from the results of the work that we do over the 5 years of the grant of this activity. So the question is, how can you get involved? Well, if you're from any of these states, California, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, Oklahoma, New Hampshire, or Wisconsin, you can certainly participate on your state team. And you can do this, just go to the STEM Equity Pipeline website, click on the state team menus, and you'll be able to identify who the contact is in your state that's leading this effort and communicate with them to get involved. And of course, participating on the website and in these webinars is also a great way to be involved with our work. So before I pass the reins over to Jill Chan, who's our presenter today, I would like to find out who's, and for her benefit too, who's participating in today's webinar. So we have a poll that's going to come up here. And if you would identify who you are based on your role, this will help us. And you'll notice there's another sort of Q&A parentheses next to the term other. So if you would be willing to tell us, if you're not one of the 5 items above, what you consider yourself to be in terms of your role in your agency or school or personally, then that would help us as well, know who we're reaching out to, especially since it looks like, I'll pop the results up here for a second. You can see that we have a lot of people who are in the other category. We have an engineer on the line, looks like. Someone who's a career education coordinator. All right. And I noticed that Bill has his hands up. And Bill, if you would, not both hands, maybe just one, if you want to submit a question, please go right ahead through the Q&A. And we have someone else on the line who's a staff with a corporate education program. Excellent. All right. So, Jill, I think now that you know who's on the line, and it looks like we have a fairly diverse group of folks, from administrators, counselors, some state agency staff, and our other group that those who shared who they were, I've given you that information. I'll let you take it away and work with us on learning how to better market our STEM CTE programs.
Great, thank you. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning and good afternoon to those of you back east. Today we're going to dig into some really nitty-gritty good basics of how to market your program, and specifically with your STEM program. And you know, with the advent of desktop publishing and also with just internal requirements because of budget constraints, many people are producing material in-house as opposed to going out to a professional, and sometimes it just is necessary for you to do that. But what I find is that many times people create things and they just, because they don't really think about some of the basic marketing principles, they're not very effective. So in the long run, they're producing materials that are not getting results, and it becomes kind of a waste of money and a waste of energy. So my goal today is really to get you to thinking about, if you're going to be putting things together internally, think about the things that you should be thinking about before you create something. But also, these ideas can be really helpful if you're working with a professional agency just in preparation. It's going to give an outside person a really good direction about what your needs are, and it will probably save you money in the long run because you won't be spending a lot of time just dabbing in the dark with a designer that doesn't really understand what goal you're trying to accomplish. So let's get started right away with just a definition of marketing, and there's lots of technical definitions of marketing, and especially when you're marketing a product or a business is marketing a service, it's a little bit different than what you guys are doing. You guys have a story to tell. You have an important story to tell. You are trying to get people engaged in the idea of young women or women in general getting involved in things that may be non-traditional for them, careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. So I look at marketing, especially from a program standpoint like yours, as a way of telling your story. You have an important story to tell, and you need to do that in a productive way. So you need to think about a specific audience, and of course then you have an expectation of a certain outcome in telling that story. Now to get us started today, I have a form that if you have a Microsoft Office Live meeting, you can download that form. And it is a PDF file that you can pull up online, and you can actually fill it in, or you can print it out and take notes on it if you'd like. I'm going to be referring back and forth to that form a couple of times during the presentation, so it might be a good thing for you to have that so you can take some notes. And then Greg also informed me that that will be at the STEMequitypipeline.org. That will be available for you to download later. So if you have a project that's coming up or multiple projects, you can use that worksheet to formulate your thoughts.
So I'm going to interrupt you just for a second and try to encourage folks to use the software that they're watching the PowerPoint on. On the top right-hand side of your screen, you should see looks like three little pages sort of piled one on top of the other. That's the download icon. If you click on that, it'll open a window that will actually have both the PowerPoint slides and this particular handout available for you to download. You can just check the box, click download, download it onto your computer. You can then open it in a screen in the background. You can minimize this, the PowerPoint that we're watching with the flat line button in the top right-hand side of your screen, or print the handout and follow along with Jill using the materials. Thanks, Jill.
Great. Thank you, Mimi. Okay, so while you're doing that, I'm just going to go through kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. In marketing, you can have different objectives for a particular project or piece or campaign that you have. So you have to, first of all, determine the correct objective before you go forward. You might have many objectives, but we're going to talk about focusing in on one of those objectives. You also may have many different audiences, and different audiences respond differently. So we're going to talk about that. So depending on your audience, then you need to think about the appropriate message. You might have a lot of things to tell in your story, but you need to, with a marketing piece, you need to be more succinct in your messaging. So you need to think about something more specifically as far as an appropriate message that you might want your audience to hear. And then finally, your marketing campaign can take on lots of different forms. There's lots of different ways to communicate your message. So depending on your audience and depending on your message, you need to think about the best way to communicate. So first of all, let's talk about objective, and that's going to be at the top part of your form. There's lots of different purposes that you might have for a specific project. One of them might be just to create an impression or image. Maybe something very simple, but perhaps, just for example, perhaps a young woman might think that going into science or technology is kind of a nerdy thing, and you don't want them to have that impression. You want them to have a different impression. So perhaps your collateral material or anything that you have out there, you want to just change that idea or change that impression. It may be, and every time it is to convey a message, of course, but you may have a very specific message. Maybe there's an event coming up or a specific course or a new type of curriculum, or just a different kind of a career that they may consider. So it may have a very specific message or information that you need to convey. you probably have, just like everybody, you have some things that are competing for your audience's attention. So you need to differentiate your program somehow and get your audience to think about why that might be different or better than something else they may be considering. You're always going to have some point of action in a particular piece, but you may want them to, when I say cause an action, I mean maybe get them to think about something a little bit different. And then maybe it's to go to a website or to attend a workshop or to, come to a specific class or something like that. But the underlying motivation objective might be to get them to change their thinking. It may be to provide a solution to a problem. Maybe there's and we know there's probably many young women out there that are looking for a career where they can actually make a decent living. Lots of single mothers out there. So they may have a specific problem, and you might have the solution to their problem. And take advantage of an opportunity. There's lots of opportunities in the STEM program and STEM careers. So you want to communicate that. So basically, if on your form here, at the top part of your form, you'll see a little section there called objective. So maybe it could be more than one of those ideas might be floating around in your head. If you have a specific project, the first question asks you to identify a specific objective. So if you have a specific project in mind right now, or you have something coming up, think about what that very most important objective might be, and maybe jot that down here in this first section. But then by the same token, you might have alternative objectives. You might have lots of objectives. So we're going to talk about a little bit later in our messaging a hierarchy of information that you're going to present. But so if you have some alternate objectives, you might want to just jot those down for your reference here in this next part, this section down here, for future reference. Okay. It's important for you to consider your objective because that's probably going to help you determine your audience. So we're going to play a little game here called Who Are They? And since we can't have a show of hands and shouting out of things, you're going to have to kind of keep your thoughts to yourself. But I think that this little exercise is going to be pretty revealing in your thinking about identifying an audience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you several samples, and I'm just going to chat a little bit about them and how they either achieve how they reach this specific target audience or maybe don't reach this target audience. Some of these pieces you might be familiar with. Some of them might be new to you. This particular piece, just look at it for a second and just your 10-second impression, think about who the audience might be for this. It's got a lot of really important information on it. And the content in this piece is about women about women in non-traditional careers, which is important. And it kind of pictures the idea that maybe there are women involved in this audience. But the reality is that this piece was a communication piece that went to legislators. And if you think about legislators, they're very busy people. They have different kinds of things that influence them, and you usually have to get a message to them very quickly. So unfortunately, I think this particular piece, although the content's important, I think it sends the wrong message visually, and it looks a little bit, it's very friendly, but I think that to a legislator, if you're trying to get their attention to advocate for your program, they may not get the right message with this. Next sample is another piece you might be familiar with. This piece is actually a piece that the target audience is teachers and educators as well as parents. Now the problem with this piece as I think you kind of get the feel of it being targeted to an educator, but because it's going to more than one audience, and because those two audiences, an educator versus a parent, would probably respond to the idea of career technical education in a different way, I think that this piece is trying to do too many things. And so, unfortunately, I think it would probably get lost on a parent because it's got a lot of content. And in this particular program, which is for Joint Special Pops, JSPAC, which some of you folks might be familiar with, many of the parents, English is their second language. So since there's a lot of content on there, it might be a little bit intimidating. It's to encourage, this piece is to encourage educators and parents to get kids thinking about non-traditional careers. So whereas there are a few pictures on there, it may not say, I don't think it really communicates the message very clearly. This is a sample of some pieces that you might be able to guess pretty easily that this has to do with health occupations education. But at least you can look at it and see that health occupations is probably comes to mind, because everything that's pictured there looks like it has something to do with the medical field. And you can also tell that it comes from the same organization because there's a real consistency of the look in each of the pieces, even though they're communicating different programs. So you know that it all comes from the same place because there's a consistent look and branding that's going on with these pieces. Another example is an organization. This organization is actually one of Phillips Mine's clients. They came to us. It's a program within the community college system, and it had been in business for a while. But they wanted to target businesses and corporations, and so they came to us and they wanted a real corporate feel, number one, and also it has to do with complying. Their organization has to do with complying to safety and OSHA requirements and dealing with hazardous materials and things like that. So the color scheme looks very hazmat oriented. It may not be something that you would use for your particular program, but in their industry, because their target audience was industry that had to do with hazmat and safety, the color scheme was created for that. The logo was created in more of a corporate kind of a look, so that we were able to target that audience pretty successfully. These particular pieces, I'm going to think about this for a minute. This particular campaign was geared to getting students at community college and high school level interested in careers in advanced transportation and technology. And so the target audience is a younger audience, high school, early 20s. And for myself, and perhaps some of you, I don't really get the UC multiplayer level 6 real-time strategy in that particular poster that's laying there. But that has to do with attracting young people to geographic information systems. And so what we tried to do with these particular pieces is get kids interested in, there's some pictures of the engines in the back. Those have to do with auto technology, aerospace technology, and then wind technology in the back. And the tagline there is, hey, it's not a job, it's a career doing what you love. So it's trying to attract young people, getting them interested in career technical education in those fields. This might look familiar to you folks. I pulled a couple of samples that Mimi sent my way, just to kind of take a look at them and evaluate. This particular piece, I'm not quite sure who the target audience is. One of the things I like about it is that the pictures, I think, these pictures are really kind of interesting pictures of young women doing different careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm thinking that this probably was targeted towards young people, maybe high school, community college, or maybe just women in general. I think one of the things, the only thing that kind of bothers me a little bit is the darkness about it. It's got a very technology feel, but it's a little, I don't know, it's a little on the foreboding side for me. But I think that that from a messaging standpoint, it kind of communicates pretty succinctly that with a big headline, computing, expand your connections, and it's got pictures of the careers that they can go into. So I think it does a good job from the messaging standpoint. Maybe the design could be a little bit different. I found these samples. I thought Mimi sent me these samples as well. I found that these samples, I think, were really good. This one you might be familiar with is something that the Girl Scouts put out, and it's to get young women and probably parents and maybe teachers excited about girls going into math, science, and technology. And the thing that really works with this piece, I'm going to click through a couple of pages that I captured. It's very friendly, isn't it? It's very colorful, it's very bright, it's inviting. And inside, the content and the message is pretty cool. It's got some cool little illustrations in there. It's got ideas. It's just all in all a really friendly, inviting little piece. So I think as far as if the objective of this piece was to get young women excited about these fields, I think that this little booklet could do a really good job. There's also a really cool website, engineeringyourlife.org, that I was referred to, and this is a great little place. I can just see high school girls being really attracted to this. They've got some young women pictured on the site. Again, it's very simple. The navigation on this website is very simple, very clean. It's got all these young women on here that when you're on the site, you can mouse over them and it tells what their careers are. It's really cool. And there's different sections on there. There's sections for parents and counselors as well, and for middle school girls. And it's just really got that feel of something that a young woman would really enjoy. It's very current. If any of you are familiar with American Girl or other things that young women really enjoy and like, this mimics that kind of look and feel. I think this is pretty successful as far as them targeting that specific audience. Okay, so who is your audience? What is the audience for those that you attract with your STEM program? My thoughts were, and I'm thinking I'm pretty close here, would be students, high school and middle school maybe. Could be adult students, even at the community college level. There's many women are having to go back to work these days, especially with the economy, and it might be that looking for higher paying careers, that you've got adult students, and they have a different demographic than a high school or a middle school student. Parents encouraging their daughters to go into those kind of maybe considered non-traditional careers for young women. You may, depending on your field, educators could be your target audience. Just getting different educators within schools, encouraging them to and how they communicate to these young women about these non-traditional careers. School administrators, getting the administrators on board to support you in your efforts to promote STEM programs. Those are some of the potential target audiences I see for the STEM program. So, one of the first things that you need to do is determining your audience and thinking about your audience. Once you've sort of identified who that target audience would be, you need to get to know them. You need to know who they are, what makes them tick, what are the things that they're interested in, and think about their characteristics. Every person has things that influence them internally and externally. And so you need to think about, when you're putting together a piece, you're thinking about this is going to lead into your messaging later. You need to think about what are the things that are meaningful to your target audience. There's a couple of things to think about. Motivation. Motivation is a stimulated need. If someone is motivated and has something that they feel that they need, they're going to look to satisfy it somehow. So in your marketing piece, you want to move them towards an action. So you need to think about what's their motivation. Perceptions. Perceptions are really interesting because many, even when you're talking, especially when you're talking about the STEM program, many young women have a wrong perception about those kinds of career choices. So think about what is their perception. Perception is the process by which people derive meaning. What is their interpretation of this? And it can be distorted, which is probably the whole purpose of why there is a STEM equity pipeline program, is there's a distorted perception of those careers. And the thing is that they are more likely to remember something that fits with their own preconceived notions and forget something that they don't relate to. So you have to figure out what is their perception, and then how can I relate to that perception in my marketing piece? What are their attitudes about it? What are their attitudes about STEM careers? That causes them to act a certain way. Does a STEM career, does that have value to them, and why would it have value to them, and what can you say to them that would would change that attitude? Would they see it as useful? Would it help them? Those kinds of things you have to think about. And what are their lifestyles? What activities and opinions and interests do the people in your target audience have? And there's also then the external influences. Social cultural groups have a really profound influence. Different ethnicities respond to things differently. There's just that cultural thing that people are raised in that really changes the way sometimes they think about things. And it's really important that you understand that, because then if you have a problem that you need to solve and you understand how that cultural group is responding to it, you could go one way that may be something very familiar to you, and if it doesn't fit with their cultural perceptions, you could completely lose that audience. You could offend them even if you're not careful and you don't consider those things. Social class, income levels can really have an impact on how someone sees something. Sometimes if people have lived with low income, they think that they can't do something, that they can't find a career, even if they're really smart. They may just think that this is my life. I can't overcome that, and look at a career in science or technology. So you need to maybe think about that to break that kind of a bias that they might have. Reference groups have direct and indirect influences. They can be groups that they already belong to, or groups that they even aspire to belong to. In family is a really important group. It's the smallest, it can be the smallest, but it has the most important influence. Do their moms and dads, their parents really support them in looking at a career that way? If you're creating a marketing piece to a parent, there may be some cultural things, there may be some influence that you need to overcome in your messaging for that group. So all these things, just throwing these things out there because you really need to think about them and know your audience. You want to find out everything you can about the audience you intend to pursue, because then you have a much better chance of capturing them and getting them to listen to what you have to offer. So on your little form, there is a section here for audience. And so just, off the top of your head, you might want to describe the audience that you want to address here. And then you can always do some research and make more notes about that audience. There might be an opportunity for you to have a group conversation with your colleagues and brainstorm some of these ideas. I've done that in some workshops with some of the groups where we just sit and we brainstorm all those different ideas, the internal and external influences of each of their target audiences, so we can know what are the things that we can say in our messaging that will be meaningful to each of those audiences. Another thing, too, on this form is there's another section there about the alternatives and what competes for their attention. That's also part of your research. What are you up against? What's competing for their attention when you're creating your marketing piece? Could be other different kinds of careers, more traditional careers. I want to make some notes there on your form of those two spots. Okay, let's talk about messaging now. The messaging that you use should accomplish your objective, and it needs to be relevant to your target audience. So on your form there, you've got another section there about messaging. And it asks, what's the most important message that you want to convey? Now, you might have lots of different messages. You might have, in your mind, you might think that there are a lot of different messages that I want to convey. But I want you to think, first of all, what's the most important message first? Because what you're going to do is you're going to establish a hierarchy of information. If you put too much content into a marketing piece, you're going to lose the effectiveness. You need to be able to get your message out there very quickly and succinctly. So the first thing you want to think about, okay, what's out of all these things that I want to say, all these parts of my story, what's the most important thing first? And then secondly, this point here, what are the three most important things that give value to your audience? And these are kind of the secondary level of information. The most important message might be that number one thing. It might not be. But what are three, and it's kind of thinking in terms of features and benefits copy. These might be things that you could use in like a call out or a pull out when you're creating a piece. Sometimes people, when you look at a piece, you look at a brochure, for example, you're going to look at the big headline, you're going to maybe look at some photos, and you're going to look at call outs first. And your hope is that by looking at those main things, it'll pull them into the copy, the rest of the text that you have in your promotional piece. And then think about how your program is different than the competition. That's important because you want to differentiate yours. You want yours to look completely different than any competition. In the business world, when I had two clients that were selling vacuum cleaners, for example, or I don't know, just think of something more exciting, but let's just say my vacuum cleaner is better than their vacuum cleaner. You wouldn't want your piece to look anything like your competition's piece. And I think by the same token with science, technology, and math, you want it to look a little bit different. You want it to stand out. But you also need to think about in your messaging how you can say that this might be a better opportunity for them perhaps, or why they should select a STEM career as opposed to something more traditional. So what makes your STEM careers different than other things that might be competing for their attention? Think about that in your messaging. The important thing with your messaging is that you need to keep it simple. Sometimes people think you got to put 100 pounds in a 1 pound bag, and it's intimidating when people, everything today is got to be a really quick message. You've got a lot of things competing for your audience's attention, especially young people. So it needs to be very concise and not wordy. I find, too, that educators tend to want to be wordy. They want to say everything, and they want to say everything with a lot of big words sometimes. You want to be careful in marketing. I hope this doesn't offend any educators, but in marketing, they say that all your marketing copy should be at the 6th grade level. And I think that whether your target is an adult or a young person, and I think the reason for that is because they can get to the message very quickly. You really, in this particular case, you don't want them, because you're marketing and you're trying to tell your story quickly, you don't want them to have to think too long. You want to get it out there very quickly. You always want to include some sort of call to action. Okay, what do you want them to do? Once they see all your content, what do you want them to do with it? Do you want them to go to a website? Do you want them to pick up the phone and call? Do you want them to register for a workshop or a presentation? What is it exactly that you want them to do? Remember, you don't have to tell the whole story on there. You want to just tell enough to them to get them interested and then act, proceed with your call to action. And also, make sure that you organize your information so that it makes sense. Test it out on people. Show it to someone that might, a potential target audience. If you're creating something that your target audience would be a young high school woman, find one, show it to her, and see if it achieves your goal. If they just look at it and they say, oh, I don't know what this is, or get what their impression is, and try to step back from it and don't be too invested personally in it, and really decide, listen to them and see, is it communicating in a logical way to that audience, and then make the necessary adjustments so that you can be successful with your piece. So you want to consider your audience when determining the form of communication. In addition to that, let's see, I skipped ahead here pretty quickly. All right, just thinking about messaging here. Okay, so let's transition then from your messaging now. Now that you've figured out what you want your message to be, now you got to think of, okay, what am I going to do now that I know what I'm going to say, who I'm going to say it to, and the goal that I want to achieve? What am I going to put it in? There's lots of different ways that you can convey your message. Brochures is a very common way. We traditionally have done a lot of things in print, and I don't think at this point print is completely going away. We'll talk about things other than print here in a few seconds or a few minutes. But there's something about getting something physical into someone's hands that sometimes makes a difference, I think, something they can hang on to and look at. So brochures is very common, but it might be that you need to think about a form that might be more attractive to, let's say, if your target audience is a young target audience. For example, this piece in the background here, this long piece, it folds up to this right here, the center, wake-up call. And when that was developed, it was when CDs were just becoming really popular, and we were trying to attract a younger audience, and so we had the brochure fold up into the form of like a CD brochure. Also, your images need to be something that they can relate to. So you want to make sure that your images attract a young audience if that's your target audience. Brochures, especially if you're communicating, these pieces were done for a local high school in Sacramento where there were many different cultures. So the piece was translated into different languages because it was going to the parents of those students, even though the students, many of them spoke English, some of the parents didn't. And for that matter, if you have an audience of parents that English is a second language, they also may not be technically savvy or have access to technical, to computers and things. So a printed piece might be the best method of getting your message to that audience. Direct mail. Direct mail is there's also permission email that's a kind of a new form of direct mail. But once again, I just I'm not completely checked out to the idea of people getting something physically in their mail. And if you do something that's bright and colorful, this is just a sampling of lots of different direct mail pieces that Philips Design has created, and you can see that they're big, they're bigger than normal. They're not 4 by 6. Most of these are 5.5 by 8.5, like a half sheet of paper. They're bright, they're colorful. You get that in your mail, and if you do multiple impressions, you can get a pretty good result from those, that type of a method. Not only that, sometimes this format of a piece can be pretty inexpensive, and it wouldn't even be something that you'd have to mail out. You could actually hand this out on campuses, put this in counseling offices if you want to promote a concept. They're very inexpensive to produce. There's a lot of online places where you can get postcards printed, and you can almost use it like a little two-sided brochure, and that's kind of a quick, easy way to get your messaging out. As I mentioned a minute or so ago, permission email is big. It depends on your audience. Once again, it's important to know your audience. Many of us get email blasts. Some things we probably read, some things we just delete and trash because we just don't have the time to look at it. So once again, it's the same principles as any of what I discussed earlier. Your messaging needs to be succinct. It needs to be well organized so that it's a quick read. But if you have a list of emails, this is a really great way to go, especially if your audience does a lot of email. The nice thing about permission email, too, is that the analytics with that, you can track who clicks through. You can see if you have a link on there that's going to click through to a website. You can do some tracking in that regard. So this could be a really good possible method of communication for you. Websites. Everybody has a website, and everybody knows how to get on the internet these days and goes to the websites for information. But once again, all those same principles. What's your objective? Who's your target audience? What's your message say? Just because you have it doesn't mean you could just throw everything up there and like in a mishmash. You want to make sure, especially, that people know how to navigate within your website. Does it make sense? Does that target audience, are they able to find the information that they want quickly? How many of us go to websites, we can't find the information that we want, and then we get tired and we just move on to the next thing? So you need to think about those things. If you have a student population, bus ads and shelter ads, bus shelters, if they do a lot of public transportation, if your audience, has that kind of a behavior that they do, public transportation, you might want to look at those kinds of ways to advertise or promote your program. They can be pretty inexpensive. You'd be surprised. Posters are a good way to communicate information on a campus. You can post posters everywhere. And then other things, social media is all the rage now, and Facebook, MySpace, Twitter. But once again, check the demographics. You can go to those places and you can look up demographics of those different places and make sure they fit your target audience. Radio. Some radio, depending on the demographic of the radio, can be very focused. You can go to a radio station and you can ask them, what is your listenership like? Recently, I did some work with a Christian, private Christian school, and we went to a Christian radio station whose demographic was mostly soccer moms. Who's going to make a decision for an elementary school for a young child would be that kind of demographic. So that radio station had was a perfect fit for the objective of this little school. Public service announcements can be cost next to nothing. School newspapers, some campuses, high school campuses, many have newspapers. You can put in ads, probably fairly inexpensively. That might be a way to get the word out. Giveaways, you can put your website on just about anything you can think of and hand that out. Podcasts, that might be something that you would consider. And you can student could download those and listen to those, look at videos and listen to that method. It might be a way to get your message out. And then finally, I want to just talk about after you've kind of thought through all those things, you might want to consider using, depending on your budget, you might want to consider using a professional to help you put your things together. A professional image is pretty critical. It gives you legitimacy with regards to your program. I know that it seems superficial, but it is really that 10-second impression. When you interview for a job or when you meet someone, you know, it's that first few seconds that people kind of get an impression of you or your program. And so your printed material kind of does that same thing. And it doesn't have to be expensive, especially if you have, like I said earlier in my presentation, if you've thought it out very well, you can go to a professional and you can have a plan, and that will help save time and money to get something produced pretty inexpensively. And something about having it done professionally gives your program the appearance of value. Just a few tips on working with a graphic designer if you've never worked with one before. Have that clear objective in mind, know your audience, collect samples. What are some things that you like that you think work well? Present that to them and explain to them what your thinking is. Know your competition so you can define that for them. Communicate your objective clearly. Provide your content, not design. The reason why you're hiring a graphic designer is because you want them to design it and put it into a format for you. So all you really need to do is give them all the words that you want to say and explain to them like we said, what's your primary objective, your most important information, and then they will put it into a design for you. Be open-minded. You may have a picture of something in your mind, but the reason they have been professionally trained, and so they may have a little bit different idea. They can execute your vision, but they may also have another idea that you might want to consider, something that you've never even thought of before. Make sure you always communicate your budget and a deadline to them, because if you give them the impression that you've got all the time in the world, then pretty much every design shop, everything is driven by a deadline. So they need to know when you need it, and they also need to know what your budget is so that they can make decisions as far as, sometimes design can go on and on and on, but if you give them some parameters to work within, then they should be respectful of that. Respect their experience and their professional direction. I think when we know how to, with desktop publishing, everybody knows how to put stuff on a page, but there really is a method to the madness. They have been professionally trained, and just like I wouldn't tell my accountant how to do my taxes, it's good to let them do what they've been professionally trained to do and present that to you. And make sure you communicate, give them good feedback. If you don't like something, a color or a picture, or it doesn't communicate what the message that you want, make sure you tell them that and explain to them why, because their job is to come up with a solution for you. Even though you may not like that color, it may not be something that you put on your wall or that you would wear, it may be something that's really attractive to your target audience. And so make sure you have some open dialogue about those kinds of things with your designer. And finally, I just want to leave you with a thought. I pulled a quote off of the Send Equity Pipeline, a brochure that they had, and I want to focus on the word engage. It says on there, if we do not engage women and minorities in the engineering enterprise, we are ignoring more than 50% of America's intellect. And I would imagine that that applies in the other fields as well, not just engineering. But the key word here is engage. And your promotional pieces, how you're going to tell your story, one of your major goals should be to engage them in your message. And so I think you have a better opportunity to be successful in that marketing effort if you think in terms of the things that I went through with you on that form, so that you can engage them into your program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mimi, I think, in case there's some questions.
Well, thanks a lot, Jill. I want to remind everyone that they can ask a question just by going to the Q&A tab on the top of your screen. Click on that and enter your question into the box and hit ask, and it will pop up in our management screen so that we can ask Jill a question. Jill, I actually have a question for you. You know, we develop a lot of print materials for our work, and I always find the most difficult thing is, well, twofold. One is we try to create things that are for multiple audiences. Do you recommend developing materials separately for separate audiences? And then the other sort of second part of the question is, I always want to put way too much stuff in them. You know, there's way too much information that I want to give to people. I'm sure you noticed that when you got the materials from our office. And how is it, you know, how do you know what the right amount of information is to share? And I know that's kind of a tough question, but maybe you could address those two things.
Well, first of all, I think first of all, with regards to two different audiences, it kind of depends on what those two different audiences are. But I think that there's a danger. I think that maybe the main motivation why that might happen is budget, trying to do too many things with a small amount of money. Mm-hmm. Maybe the better idea would be to take your project, what you have in mind for a project, and if it's going to cost X dollars, maybe you think of, well, how can I do two projects with that same amount of money? Maybe I have to think of a different format or think of a different methodology. But unless your target audiences really, as I said, have the same motivations and perceptions, and you have the same exact message going out to them, I think that you're in danger of losing one or the other if you try to do too much with it. And then with regards to content, I think you have to it's kind of a common sense approach, honestly. I don't think too much of this is rocket science. It's just kind of one of those things where you kind of have to step back and think of what makes the most sense. Yeah. You know, think about, well, why is it that I feel compelled that I have to put all this on here? And maybe it'd be better to put, I don't know, a handful of those things on the printed piece and then direct them to a website where at their leisure they could look for more of those things. Or, you know, direct them to another piece. But in a business environment, where you would never do that is you wouldn't want your printed material to sell the product or service. You would want your printed material to get that person to pick up the phone and call and ask someone so that then they could be engaged in a relationship with someone that, you know, you typically would be able to sell that product or service to that person. And I think it is the same way with you guys. There is a certain amount of selling that you're having to do with STEM careers, because this is something where you're asking these young people to think outside the box, or you might be having to talk to a parent about thinking outside the box, that maybe they wanted their daughter to get married and have a family, but she's just all over science. She loves science, and so maybe you're going to have to sell that to that parent somehow. And how is that printed piece going to do that? You know, if you're passionate about something, you're going to do 100 times better job at it than a printed piece is. So you just want to give them enough information to get their interest, and then that call to action has to be pretty primary so that they pick up that phone and call or go to that website or whatever that's going to be.
So it sounds to me like the marketing component of any program has to be a piece of a variety of strategies. There was a question that came up about how do you deal with the reality that the rigor of STEM programs is seen as a negative by many students. And I think what you're saying is that you sort of paint an image in the print material which has to then be supported by all the other things that are going on. Is that what you're saying, that it's more than just the poster or the brochure, or you know, that then when they make the contact or they participate in the program, they have to feel the same support?
Well, I think that you know, I mean, if you're talking about the rigor of the STEM program, and let's say your target audience is young women, this is just off the top of my head, and you know your demographic, maybe you could do something like you take that, which is a negative, and you turn it into something positive. Like, do you want to be a tough chick? Then tough chicks love science or something like that. And you promote the idea that, yes, this is rigorous, because you can't lie. Yes, this is rigorous. It is tough. But the benefits of doing this is blah, blah, blah. And we are here for you. We've got support. We'll be here to answer your questions. We'll be here to help you with time management, with your study skills, with tutoring, whatever those ways that you can benefit. But you turn your messaging into something that counters that. Because, you know, there's going to, I mean, honestly, there'll be students that won't be able to step up to the rigor of it, or maybe they are just lazy. I don't know, but turn it into something that has a positive twist to it, so that then what you're doing is you're changing that negative perception again. You know, that's what we talked about. They have a distorted perception. Well, in this case, it's not distorted. It's an honest perception, but it's causing them to not be motivated to pursue it. So how can you take that? What would make them change their mind? You know, just an idea.
Well, Jill, this has been exceptional. I must say that I am now going to go back and look seriously at all of our promotional materials. We happen to have a fabulous graphic design person on our staff who does a really good job, but I'm always pushing, I think, to do things that maybe I shouldn't be. So I'm going to be, in my position, I'm going to follow your advice, use the forum, think seriously about our target audience, make sure that I have a brief and quick and succinct message that encourages folks to call our office or visit our website. And with that in mind, all of you who are still involved with the webinar, I would like to encourage you to contact Jill if you are so inclined, and or contact our offices. You can get our contact information off of our website at stemequitypipeline.org. Jill, this has been fantastic. I appreciate it. I'm going to pass the baton on over to Greg. He has a few housekeeping items to close the webinar up. And again, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that if any of you have something that you'd like me to critique or have any questions, feel free to email me at this email address, jill@phillipsdesign.com. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Remember that this webinar will be available on the STEMequitypipeline.org website under the Professional Development heading and then under Archived Webinars in the next few days. In a few minutes, you will be sent an email with a link to a survey that we would like for you to answer for us. Thank you all for your time today.